Statuta Valachorum, Serbo-Croatian, Vlaški statute was a decree issued by Emperor Ferdinand II of the Habsburg Monarchy on 5 October 1630 that defined the rights of Vlachs in the military frontier, in a way that it placed them under direct rule by Vienna, removing the jurisdiction of the Croatian parliament. This was one of three major laws enacted in the early 17th century on the taxation and tenancy rights of the Vlachs, together with the earlier 1608 decree by Emperor Rudolf II and a 1627 decree by Ferdinand. Background: in the mid-16th century, the military frontier was established as a buffer against the Ottoman Empire. Balkan refugees, including Serbs, crossed into Habsburg lands. Military colonists were exempted from some obligations and granted small land tracts, and allowed to elect their own captains and magistrates. Slavonia was continuously settled by Serbs from various regions since the 15th century. A large migration of Serbs into Croatia and Slavonia from Ottoman territory took place in 1600. Freedom of religion was promised to all Orthodox settlers. The Habsburg monarchy was effectively divided into separate civil and military parts, with Emperor Ferdinand's granting full civil and military authority of the military frontier to a general officer in 1553. This displeased the Hungarian Diet and Croatian nobility. Stripped of their authority in the frontier, the Croatians tried to reduce the frontier's autonomy. The incorporation of the frontier into Croatia would mean the loss of status and prerogative of the Grenzes. In 1608, Austrian Emperor Rudolf II instituted such a law, under which Vlachs of the military frontier, regardless of the faith, owed 1/10 of their income to the Bishop of Zagreb, and 1/9 to the feudal lords whose land they occupied. This law had little practical effect, but it appeased the Croatian nobility at the time. The heraldic emblem used for these Vlachs was the Serbian Nemanjić dynasty coat of arms. In the 1610s and 1620s, there were conflicts between the Vlachs and the Croatian nobility. The Croatians demanded the abolishment of the frontier and incorporation into Croatia. In 1627, the Warostina Grenza told authorities they'd rather be hacked into pieces than be separated from their offices and become subjects of the Croatian nobility. In 1627, Emperor Ferdinand II granted the Vlach people inhabiting the regions of Slavonia and Croatia the right to stay undisturbed in the settlements and estates. The frontier Vlachs were allowed land use regardless of the land's ownership, in an effort to make the Grenzes independent of the Croatian nobility, and more willing to wage wars for him. This decision has been interpreted as a feudalization attempt, and in 1628, it was feared that if the Vlachs left the frontier for Ottoman Slavonia, the military and economical strength of the Habsburg monarchy would be notably weakened and threatened. At an assembly of California, 3,400 war-equipped Vlachs, it was promised that the Vlachs stay under military organization and be given regulations in form of a statute, thereby regulating their legal status. The next year, the Croatian parliament tried once again to pass a law in which the refugee community be included into the jurisdiction of the Habsburg Kingdom of Croatia, however, without results. In early 1630, representatives of Croatian nobility and Vlachs met in Vienna. The Croatian nobility pressured the emperor to enact a decree on 10 May, in which the Serbs paid the nobility as much as they paid the captains. However, the unhappy Serbs between the Sava and Drava instead gave Colonel Trautmannsdorf their own draft, which would regulate relations to the state, and economical, legal and and social relations. The War Council established a commission to study this draft. The Austrian court chancellery issued a statement to the emperor on the 30th of September, in which it is highlighted that great military importance of the Vlach population accommodated between the Sava and Drava, whose numbers in the last 30 years increased to such extent that they have become the solid bulwark of the military frontier against the Turks. Statute. Based on the Grenzes petitions and the court statement, Emperor Ferdinand II issued the Statuta Valachorum on 5 October 1630, in effect in the Viraždan Generalate, that is, the captaincies of Koprivnica, Křiževci and Ivana. The statute was signed in Regensburg, and was a compromise to the Grenzes' demands. It was given to a delegation of 12 Grenzes, military commanders and clergy. The Orthodox refugee community, called Vlachs, were mainly Serbs. In its essence, the statute enabled for the Vlachs election of local authorities. An argument for the consideration of the statute as that of a basis for the population's inner autonomy. The local authorities included kneses and judges as representatives of executive and legislative powers. The decree laid out the rights and obligations of the settlers that stabilized the status for years after. These rights assumed free land given to the settlers, the civil administration based on the settlers' traditional law. All the rights were given in return for the settlers' military service to the Austrian emperor. All males over 16 were obliged to serve militarily. Ferdinand II did not include matters of land ownership in the statute, so that he wouldn't upset Croatian nobility. The goal of Statuta Valachorum was to bring the Vlachs under supervision of the imperial court, giving them an appearance of autonomy, despite the fact that the level of self-government they had prior had actually decreased. The statute created a separate region at the expense of the Croatia-Slavonia province. The statute also included the first delineation of the Viraždan Generalate. Aftermath and legacy. The statute applied only to Vlachs in the area of the Viraždan Generalate, later came to be used by all Vlachs. A rebellion broke out in the Generalate in 1632, when the frontiersmen rose up against local Austrian governors. The rebellion was suppressed, and Knez Marko Bogdanović and Harambasa Smiljan Vujica were executed. When Ferdinand III came to power, the ownership of the Croatian military frontier was transferred to the imperial court. A rebellion broke out in the Generalate in 1665–66 when frontiersmen under Stefan Osmo Krujović rose up against the Austrian officers, after the rights of the frontiersmen had been compromised. On 14 April 1667 the statute was revised. In the 18th century, the nobility was finally formally deprived of all frontier land when it was declared an imperial fief. The importance of the statute is seen in it being the first public law document regarding rights of citizens within the military frontier. These grants to Serbs made them valuable allies of the Habsburg government against the Catholic Croatian nobility. The warrior tradition of the Serbs of Croatia, which includes the service to the Habsburg Monarchy and the Statuta Valachorum, is an important part of the identity of the community still today. Annotations.